Hi guys, and welcome to our last collab for the semester. You do still, while I say that, you do still have your NSS for the exam with George next week, which will be on Tuesday the 14th at 6:30. So just remember that. I have put that in your announcement as well. I'm assuming that the link for that will be the same as the last one that he sent, but if he sends me a link later this week or on Monday, then obviously I'll upload that for you guys as well. That will be for Tuesday evening. So this evening is really just meant to be an open mic. If anybody has got any questions that they've got for me now while you're starting your exam revision, if there's anything you've come across in your revision that you want help with, that I can explain to you, or anything at all at this stage of the semester that you want to talk about. But at this point, there isn't anybody online yet. So if anybody does pop in, they're welcome to chat. And then besides that, the only other thing that I wanted to do was to share with you a document that I prepared. Let me just go to it and put it up on the screen. I've called it the exam lesson plan, and what it really is just a summary of the important hints and tips for exam strategy. In other words, things to remember when you go into the exam. Basically, what I was saying to some of the students last night is that you must have a plan when you go in to sit down to write that exam. You must go in with a plan of exactly how you're going to approach those 180 minutes, those 3 hours that you will be sitting there writing your paper. You must have a plan for those for that time, that you know exactly how you're going to go through the paper during that time. So that to me is the most important thing from this document. So I'm just quickly going to go through that. And then I've got some other pointers on this document as well for most common errors that students make in exams. So that's also just to make you aware of that up front, so that you remember, go through it and say, okay, yes, I must remember these are the things I must make sure I double check and that I don't make these same mistakes. And then for what I call your exam chapters, your last 3 learning units, which are the exam learning units, just a few things that I've highlighted there, which are things that you must remember and the things to pay attention to that are most important to know before you go into that exam. So let's just have a look at this first part, which is your exam strategy, which is what you should be doing. Just hold on, I just want to turn off this light behind me. It's, oh no, that must obviously be the sun reflecting. I thought it was the light. Try and turn this way, that's better. It's not such a glare behind me. What was I saying? Yes, okay, so your exam strategy for when you go in. So you guys have got 15 minutes reading time prior to your 3 hours of writing time. So it's super important that those 15 minutes you use them correctly and to your best advantage for planning exactly how you're going to approach the paper. So for your actual paper, you do not have to write your questions in the same order as the question paper. So you don't have to start with question 1 and then 2 and then 3 and so on. You can complete the questions in whatever order you want, and you should choose your own order. Because what you're going to do in those 15 minutes is you're going to read through the questions, specifically looking at the required of each question, so that you know exactly what you're going to have to do in each of those questions. And you're going to note next to each one which question you know the best and that you could complete the fastest. So you're looking for those shorter questions, the 20-minute question, the 15-minute questions, 10-minute questions, and you want to complete those quickly first to get those marks down on the paper and get those questions out of the way, so that when you get to the 30 and 40 mark questions, and remember 30 marks means 30 minutes and 40 marks means 40 minutes, you've left those to the end, so that all those minutes you've saved up in doing those questions first that you know quickly, those extra minutes you've saved, you can put those towards taking your time with those questions that you maybe aren't that sure about, and that you need to slow down to really get the maximum marks. Okay, please remember that. So those 15 minutes, don't try and read the questions through in detail, because that's not necessary. You just want to identify what they've asked you and which questions you, in what order you are going to do those questions. Okay. So complete the questions that can give you the most marks on the board in the shortest possible time first. That's your aim. Also, remember very clearly, 1 mark equals 1 minute. So this second point over here, without fail, keep track of how many minutes you have spent on each question, and do not go over time. So that means if it's a 10-mark question, when you get to 10 minutes, you're going to stop writing and you are going to move on to whatever question you've chosen to do next. Leave some space. Remember, you've got plenty of paper. They must give you as many answer books as you need to answer. Start each question on a new page. And if you haven't completed a question, be sure to leave extra space so that you can go back to it if you've got time at the end. But whatever you do, do not steal minutes from another question. If you take 20 minutes over a 15-minute paper, you have already taken 5 minutes from all the rest of your questions, and you cannot get that time back. Okay, so remember, you can always go back at the end of when you finished writing to check and tidy up any loose ends, but you cannot get minutes back. So you have to take a watch with you and check what time did you start writing. I used to always write down on my paper, so the top right-hand side of each question in brackets, they've got 15 marks or 20 marks or 30 marks, which means 30 minutes. And right next to that, I used to write the time that I began that question. So you guys, I think, are starting your paper at, where's 5122? You started it at 8 o'clock in the morning. So let's say you start a question at 8:30. Then right next to it, those 30 minutes, you're going to write at the top there 8:30 and a dash and 9 o'clock, which is, at a glance, you can quickly see you started the question at 8:30 and you must finish it by 9 o'clock and then move on. And in that way, you keep track. If you don't keep track of what you're doing like that as you go through, then you are just going to keep going over and you are not going to finish all of the questions. So in an accounting exam, the most important thing to do to make sure that you get all of the marks is to make sure that you finish as many questions as possible, as completely as you can. These first 2 points here, if I can just explain one thing to you this evening that you'll remember, that is important. So please make sure that you apply that. Then the other thing I want to talk to you about is your theory questions. So remember your learning objectives, which are given at the start of every learning unit, both on Learn as well as in your module outline. Those are your learning outcomes, and that is what they are going to ask you. They're not going to ask you anything else. They will ask you those learning objectives. So make sure that those learning objectives are the questions that you prepare specifically for your theory questions. And make sure you know what those learning objectives are, and that for each learning unit, you can tick each of those learning objectives off to say, yes, I know that, yes, I know that, yes, I know that, yes, I prepared that, yes, I could write a paragraph on that. Because by doing that, you have also then made sure that you are putting in the bank as many marks as possible. There's nothing worse than having a question for 10 marks of theory that's straight from a learning objective and you didn't prepare for it, and you've just got to skip over those 10 marks and leave them out. Okay, you need every single mark possible. So make sure you've prepared your learning objectives. And then the last thing for this section is, remember again, accounting is a skill. It's an actual vocational skill, and all skills need to be practiced for us to get proficient. In other words, to get good at doing something, you have to practice it over and over and over again. And there's no other way to do it. You can't just sit in bed and read through something and then say, okay, yes, I've understood that, and then go on to the next thing. You have to practice with blank paper, your workbook, and over again, practice your paragraph questions from the learning objectives, rub out and redo questions in your workbook over and over again. Go through the examples in your textbook over and over again until you completely understand them. You can do all the calculations and you know exactly what goes in each, for instance, your appropriations account. You know exactly what the steps are. So in this accounting 1B, most of the things that you've got to remember, I would say, is to remember them in what are the steps to completing this. So for instance, your bank recon, there are those steps that you've got to follow. So know what the steps are, memorize those so that you know exactly what you've got to do. The same thing with your debtors and creditors reconciliations. What are the steps that you're going to follow from beginning to end to complete a debtors reconciliation? In your T accounts, your bank T account for bank recon, your debtors control and creditors control for your learning unit 2. What are the entries that belong on the left-hand side, debit side, and the right-hand side, the credit side, in each of those T accounts? They'll be the same every single month. So make sure you know exactly what belongs in those T accounts, because you will get asked questions like that. Your learning unit 3, depreciable assets. Make sure you know the steps for disposal of an asset. Because if you remember the steps and you can recite them in your mind, then you can do those journal entries. You can complete the T accounts that need to be completed, and you'll be able to do those calculations. Financial statements of a sole trader, also you need to know your steps. Your partnerships, you need to know the steps to completing the appropriations account at the end of a financial year. Okay, that's the way I would learn your 1B, definitely. Same thing, learning unit 7, incomplete records. Step number 1, what do I do first? Step number 2, what follows next? Step number 3, what do I do next? So that you can, as you brushing your teeth in the morning, you're taking your dog for a walk, as you're walking along, you'll say to yourself, okay, now let's recite the steps to disposal of a fixed asset. Okay, let's recite the steps to completing a bank recon. And you continuously practice like that. I can still remember that's how I used to learn my accounting, and that really does help you. Okay. Then just a couple of other things. There's some specific areas that you have to master. So these are basically calculations, and a lot of information of this comes from 1A, that please do not forget. Make sure you know how to do these calculations and you remember all of these things. Your VAT categories and your VAT calculations, that's still important for your debtors and creditors ledgers. Your markup and your gross margin calculations, also in your debtors and creditors calculations, that can come in. The difference between using the 2 inventory systems, so whether we are using periodic or perpetual, what are the general ledger accounts, what's the difference between the 2? Because again, in any question that they give you, they could say this company uses periodic or this company uses perpetual, and you need to know the difference. For everything, remember your dead click. Those accounts that increase on the debit side, expenses, assets, drawings. Those accounts that increase on the credit side, liabilities, income, and capital. Practice at that. Practice, practice, practice. Table 52, that's your chart of accounts, which helps you to identify what is an expense, what is an asset, what is a liability, what is an income account. You must be able to identify that, because if you can't identify whether something is an expense or an asset or liability or an income, then you are also not going to get your left and right hand side correct. So that's very important. Then also make sure, this goes back to 1A, that you understand and remember your accounting equation. And you know it backwards and forwards. You know that, so our accounting equation, on the left-hand side of the accounting equation, we've got assets. And then there's our equal sign in the middle. And on the right-hand side, we've got owner's equity plus liabilities. And the left-hand side must always equal the right-hand side for our accounting equation. So assets is easy to identify, liabilities is easy to identify, but how do I work out what belongs in owner's equity? So then again, remember, owner's equity is capital minus drawings for the current financial year. And then we add to that the profit for this particular year. So capital minus drawings plus the profit for this particular year. And profit is worked out by saying, for this financial year, all of my incomes added together minus all of my expenses for the current financial year. Okay, so you need to understand all three of those steps to make sure that you can get your accounting equation correct, because sometimes they'll give you income and expense information and you've got to calculate the profit, and sometimes they'll give you capital but they'll give you the drawings amount and the profit amount, and you've got to calculate the owner's equity. So make sure that you understand the accounting equation and how that works. And then this one is very important. Make sure that you understand the difference between a general journal and a general ledger. So remember, the general journal, that word journal tells us it is one of our journals. In other words, one of our subsidiary journals. So it's like cash book payments, cash book receipts, petty cash, salaries journal, debtors allowances, debtors journal, creditors allowances, creditors journal, the general journal. It forms one of our 8 basic subsidiary journals in which we record the transactions for the month. Then the general ledger is our whole accounting system that we then enter the totals from all of our journals into at the end of each month, when we have totaled all of our subsidiary journals and we've got column totals. So the general ledger consists of all of our T accounts, and our trial balance is a list of all of our general ledger accounts that we've got in our chart of accounts. So again, go over and over this. Make sure you know what the format of the general journal looks like if they ask you to complete transactions in a general journal, and make sure you know what the format of a T account is if you have to complete a T account. Okay. And then some other things over here, which are the common errors that students make while completing various tasks. So not all of these will come up in 1B. Some of these were appropriate to 1A, but they could very well still come up in questions, particularly I'm thinking in the debtors and creditors journals, in your bank recon, in transactions that belong in your bank accounts for your bank recon. Definitely in Learning Unit 4, all of those adjustments that you've got to make, these items could appear there. So remember, if you have got a rental transaction, commercial or business rental, in other words, for your business premises, that does attract VAT. In other words, it is a standard rated item. And if you are a VAT registered vendor, you have to add VAT to business rent. If it is domestic rental, in other words, somebody is renting a house that they're going to live in, then that is exempt from VAT. So even if the landlord is a VAT registered vendor, if he rents out a dwelling for someone to live in, he will not add VAT to that transaction because domestic rental is exempt from VAT. Business rental is standard rated. And then when it comes to VAT on bank statements from the various charges that the bank gives you, ordinary bank charges is a standard rated service that the bank is performing for you. So we do add VAT to bank charges. It does include VAT. But if the bank is either paying you interest on your balance or they're charging you interest on an overdraft, interest is always exempt from VAT. It is an exempt item. Bank charges is a standard rated item. And then similarly on your municipal accounts, only the rates portion of the bill is an exempt item because rates is already a tax. So we don't tax a tax. So rates is exempt, no VAT is added to that, but all other services on your municipal account, like your water, your electricity, refuse collection, what else have they got, availability charges, all of those are standard rated services and VAT is included on them. Okay. And then I've just made some notes here on your last three, what I've called the exam chapters. I won't go through all of these details now with you because I am going to upload this document for you. But please print this document out and make sure that you go through this. It is like a little summary sheet that's going to help you to identify the most important sections of each of these learning units that you need to remember. So I've said the last three learning units of the exam chapters, make sure you know these well, but I've made notes on all of your learning units. Again, just some little summary notes to say, guys, bank recons, remember this is the most important things. This is, make sure that you've revised this when you do this. So for instance, as I said before, your bank recons, remember the steps to doing a bank recon. That's what you really want to remember. And then also, where else? Your bank account in your general ledger. Make sure you know exactly what belongs on the left-hand side, what belongs on the right-hand side of your T account bank in the general ledger. Okay, that's very important to that question. Your learning unit 2, the debtors and the creditors ledgers. I've just made some notes here to help you remember. So remember, if it is the debtors ledger, then your main balance column on the right-hand side is going to be a debit balance. When you are doing your creditors ledger, which are those suppliers that you've purchased from, then your balance column on the right-hand side is a credit. Okay, so debtors ledger, the balance is a debit. Creditors ledger, the balance is a credit. And remember, your job is with each transaction to decide, is that balance increasing or decreasing as a result of this transaction? So then you will know whether to put that transaction in the debit column or the credit column, and whether your balance is increasing or decreasing. So that's the most important thing to remember. Debtors ledger, the balance is a debit. Creditors ledger, the balance is a credit, and your dead click is going to apply here as well. So take your time, don't rush. Make sure you get your transactions in the right column, the debit column or the credit column. Make sure you fill in the folio because there are often marks allocated to that. Don't neglect to fill in information that they have allocated marks to. Why can't I find this? Sorry, I'm just quickly paging in my textbook to find an example of my recons. I can't find it now quickly. But anyway, okay. That's the most important thing with your debtors and creditors, to make sure you're getting your debits and credits on the correct side. And again, Debtors control and creditors control your general ledger T accounts. Make sure, again, you know exactly what belongs on the left-hand side and right-hand side of each of those two T accounts, because they are always identical. Transactions get posted to the left and right-hand side at the end of each month. So it's easy to memorize those. And again, remembering if it's a debtors control, it will increase on the left-hand side and decrease on the right-hand side. My creditors control will increase on the right-hand side and decrease on the left-hand side. Then your depreciable assets, learning unit 3, make sure you can do both methods of depreciation. That's both the straight line and the diminishing balance method. So our straight line method, whatever percentage depreciation they've given us, we calculate that percentage as a percentage of our cost of the asset. And if we are using diminishing balance, whatever percentage depreciation they've given us, we take that percentage as a percentage of the carrying value of the asset. That's all that you've got to remember, and then just do your calculations correctly. Always draw a timeline on your question paper when it comes to doing depreciation questions, to make sure that you know whether the purchase or disposal of a particular asset, if it happened halfway through a year, how many months you owned that asset for, because we only depreciate an asset for the number of months in a year that we owned it. Okay, so if we owned an asset on the 1st of January and we sold it on the 30th of June, we are going to depreciate that asset from the 1st of January to the 30th of June, just for those 6 months. Then we sold it, so there's no more depreciation. If I purchased an asset on the 1st of June, or let's say the 1st of July in a year, and then I didn't own it for 1st of January to the 30th of June. I didn't own that asset. I only purchased it on the 1st of July. I will only depreciate that asset for the 1st of July through to the 31st of December, because I will only depreciate it for those months that that asset was in my possession. So that's what you need a timeline for. Your LU4, your sole trader, financial statements of a sole trader. I have already given you some quite extensive study notes for that in your announcement, so go through that again and just make sure I've given you again page numbers, examples, important questions that you can go through. And in this chapter, it is those adjusting journal entries and the 4 accruals that are important to make sure you know exactly how to do that. Practice is the only way that you're going to get that correct every time. It's quite a long chapter. I would imagine you're going to spend a lot of time on learning unit 4. Then in your partnerships chapter, it's really the new thing in your partnerships chapter is that we have got an appropriations account that we put all of the profits into at the end of a year. And then we go and have a look at the partnership agreement, which tells us how those profits are supposed to be divided up amongst all of the partners in the business. So that is, again, the steps to how do we put everything, all the profit into the appropriations account, and then post the profit out of the appropriations account into each partner's account, and do those calculations for splitting the profit amongst the partners' equity accounts. Okay. Example 5.1, page 161, that will help you a lot. Then your closed corporations. So your closed corporations, again, in this one here, with the difference is that we don't use an appropriations account, because in a closed corporation, you might have many members of a CC. So we don't use those individual partners accounts that we do in a partnership, because we might just have too many members, and you can't have pages and pages of members accounts in your trial balance. That just isn't practical. So we use a different method in closed corporations, where we show how we have split the profits amongst the members in those 2 special statements, which are the movement in each member's interest from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and then another statement, which are what were the transactions with members. So we use those two statements to show the individual transactions with members. And in our actual trial balance, we've only got one account called, what is it called? Members' interest and retained earnings, which is everything all in one account. And that's just to keep things tidy. So that's your difference between a sole trader, because sole trader, we don't need an appropriations account because we only have one owner. So the profits go directly to the capital account, and the drawings goes directly to the capital account once we've worked out the profit for the year. In a partnership, we have individual accounts for each partner, and we use the appropriations account just as a workings account at the end of the year to split the profit. And in closed corporations, we don't have individual accounts for each member, and we use those two statements for showing the readers of our financial statements as to what has happened with each member's interest during that particular year. And then your Learning Unit 7 incomplete records, that is just showing how we can take the books of a small company where they haven't kept double entry system records all the way through the year. These are guys that operate a bank account and a cash book and a shoebox where they throw all of their slips in. And at the end of the year, they come to us and they say, please, I need to draw up financial statements for my tax return. And then you've got to help them. So this is where incomplete records comes into play. And in this chapter, we teach you how to take that kind of bookkeeping and to be able to turn it into a proper statement of, not the statement of profit or loss, your statement of financial position and statement of changes in equity. Those are the two important ones there. Okay. So guys, I will post this document for you into your announcements. It'll either be, I'll probably put it into more resources as well, so that you can go through all of these things and read them carefully. And all of these other hints and tips that I've given you, please go through them and make sure that you take this all to heart now while you are doing your revision for your exams. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to speak to you about this evening. I've tried to keep it short and sweet this evening so that the recording is not too long to listen to, and you've got the recording and you've got the document as well. So guys, I'm just wishing you the very, very best of luck for the exam. I will still be chatting to you in announcements between now and when you write, and probably still making some other recordings of exam papers, etc. for you. Remember, let me know if there are any questions whatsoever now while you're doing your revision. Thanks, guys. Have a lovely rest of your evening. And as I said, very best of luck for your exams. Cheers, guys.